Arsenal go to the Etihad Stadium. They managed to secure a second clean sheet against the treble winners this campaign. And not only are there people moaning, people complaining, not celebrating what was an important and vital point, which before the game, I told you and many others said they, of course, would have taken if indeed offered toward them. But we're finding ourselves on the end of somehow a battering from critics, from journalists and others in the media, that Arsenal didn't somehow play the way that they wanted to, play the way that has cost them so many times before in this ground, and instead went there with a job to do, went there with an aim to win, but instead making sure they didn't lose. This is the Arsenal Raw Reaction show of just exactly how Mikel Arteta masterminded two clean sheets against a side that have managed to succeed in scoring in 57 consecutive home games in a row and come out of it still being criticised. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal Raw Reaction show. Joining you as always the morning after the game before, of which we do this every single morning for whatever show it happens to be at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me. It is very much appreciated. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I hope you enjoyed Easter if indeed you do celebrate it. And I hope that you're enjoying a bank holiday Monday if indeed you've got one to enjoy today. Thank you as always for tuning in live. Those that are in our live chat box, please do drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. We try and reach 1,000 likes in every single one of our morning shows. So if you could help us on our way to that target, it would be hugely appreciated. Thank you for those listening on Catch Up and watching on YouTube on Catch Up too. Do make sure you hop over if you're listening on audio platforms and drop a like on the video as well to help us out on our target. Good morning to Babatundi, to Steve, to Kevin. Good morning to Javier and MD, A1, Matt G, James, Kaiser, Runs with Cows, Shari, Nate, Tabani. We've got Adegoke. We've got Javier Namira. We've got NSW and Temi, Granddaddy Gooner, Paul, Keith, Peter. Thank you for tuning in. Angela. We've got Maximius and Robert as well. Thank you, all of you and more, for tuning in. It is hugely appreciated. And I hope you've had a fantastic weekend, and all of you too. Let's kick off with the big news of yesterday, and that is, of course, the Arsenal in the Conti Cup. Yesterday, amazing result there. Jonas Eidevall securing what was and looked to be the only opportunity to win a trophy, the only chance to win a trophy, it seems Arsenal had on the women's side this season, and they managed to do it, which, of course, was very much appreciated as well. So a massive congratulations to Jonas Eidevall and the Arsenal women's team on securing victory in the Conti Cup. I said a number of times before, I said during, I think, one of the shows when someone asked me who my favourite women's player was, and I said to you that Stina Blackstenius was my favourite women's player because I just thought how underrated she is. And actually going into this game, there was some real scrutiny regarding Jonas Eidevall's selection and lineup and why Alessia Russo was on the bench. And actually, in the end, he's managed to secure a very important performance. Our thoughts, of course, are with Frida Marnham, who seems to have suffered quite a serious injury. We don't have all the details on that at the moment, but hopefully she's okay. But a brilliant result and amazing result for the Arsenal women there yesterday. A real shame that it crossed over, of course. So Arsenal fans on the whole weren't able to enjoy both games yesterday. A really frustrating scheduling issue there. They could have pushed the Man City game back by an hour or pushed the, the Premier League games are the ones that probably should have moved for a cup final, but it is what it is, I suppose. And still, in the end, it was a brilliant result and a brilliant victory. And Jonas Eidevall may indeed have just saved his job with that result as well. Moving to Manchester, which is, of course, where the bulk of our focus will be today. Manchester City 0, Arsenal 0. The plan was to win, but it was more important not to lose. Now, for me, Arsenal went into this game, and I watched this game and came away from this game thinking Arsenal did everything they could to try and win this game, in my view. to the tactical battle of which it was. You saw people moaning, complaining at full time, particularly rival fans. Rival fans really took umbrage with this game, that it was billed to be these two tactical geniuses going at it with their two sides, and that in the end, I think most of it cancelled each other out in some ways. But Arsenal went there knowing what we've come to expect from Manchester City. We have not managed to win there in an exceptionally long period of time. The goals that we've conceded in the amount of games that we've played. In fact, it's the first time in 3.5 years that we've not conceded there in the league in the first 7 minutes of the game. That's where we find ourselves at with this fixture in particular. It's been a massive challenge for Arsenal to get anything from this game in so many years. And once again, Arteta has managed to find a way to break that theme, break that run, disrupt the order. And he did that yesterday with how he set things up. And I usually end with Mikel Arteta in these breakdowns. I usually end with him and talk about the job that he did after focusing on the players. But I'm going to start with Arteta today, because I asked you the question, what is a manager's job? What is the job of the coach? What is it their responsibility on a match day? And giving you a couple of seconds to think about your answer. The answer to that question of what a manager's job is, a manager's job is to set his team up, or her team in the case of the women's side, of course. It is their job to set their team up to win. A manager's job is to give his side the best opportunity of winning every single game possible. And Mikel Arteta did that yesterday. Mikel Arteta set up his style, what he chose to do, how we approached the game, how we adapted to yesterday's game, was all in order to try and win it. Now, some people have compared this to a Jose Mourinho park the bus type performance. And if those of you that think that watched yesterday's game and came to that conclusion, I think it's lazy. I think it's naive, and I think it's ignorant to what actually Mikel Arteta did. I think it also ignores the selection, and I think it ignores what we saw and some of the changes we saw in the game. And I also think it ignores some of the quotes that we saw coming out of yesterday's game afterwards. Martin Odegaard spoke to Sky after the game, was immediately interviewed after and asked about the way in which Arsenal played. And if you listen to what Martin Odegaard said in that post-match interview, he starts off by saying that we planned to play higher up. We planned to play with a higher line. We wanted to play further forwards. The plan, it seemed, going into this was always to play further forwards, was to try and break up the City play higher and counter more effectively when we could, and try and win the ball into those advantageous positions. City played excellently yesterday in terms of their build-up, in terms of their ball retention in the second half in particular, and they stopped Arsenal from doing that. And I think that's the biggest factor. The biggest elephant in the room yesterday was Manchester City, because for so many critics, the focus is on Arsenal. For so much of the analysis, it's on Arsenal. And so few are actually focusing on the giant elephant that remains in the Etihad Stadium week in, week out, which is Manchester City, and the way in which they approached the game, the way in which they tried to win the game, and the way in which they tried to win every single game at home, and the reason as to why they have scored in 57 consecutive home matches before this fixture. And Arsenal plan to play slightly differently. And Odegaard said that after the game. Not only that, but we chose Jorginho for this fixture. Now, Jorginho is not the type of player that you pick if you want a low block. Jorginho is not the type of player that if you want to defend deep and helping you get, turnovers and interceptions and quick play. Jorginho is an orchestrator. Jorginho is a conductor. Jorginho, like we saw in that Liverpool game at home this season where he had a man-of-the-match performance, is a player that pulls the strings when you've got possession, enabled and helping you to get out in certain situations, but mostly when you're dominant and when you're trying to feed the ball from the centre-halves to the midfield, Jorginho allows you that press-resistant pass. It allows you the ability to play through an opposition team. And Jorginho is not the type of player that you start if you're aiming to play a low block. So there were so many signals that Arsenal went into this game with the intention not of playing the game in the end of how it turned out. And actually, it was the right decision in the second half to bring off Jorginho and go with Partey, who was more suited to the dynamic of the game. A fully fit Partey and Partey that's been playing week in, week out would have been far more suited. But still, it was the right decision in the end on the day to make that switch in the second half. but there was an intention from Arsenal to do one thing, but the game state and the way the game played out meant they were forced into doing something different. And that something different was defending slightly deeper and was hitting on the counter where possible, but pressing and forcing Manchester City into mistakes which were certainly present. We saw that with a number of times. I think twice they conceded corners from loose passes back to their own defenders. Of course, they lost Nathan Ake in the first half, which meant Rico Lewis came on and Arsenal tried to exploit that weakness at times. And in the end, despite Nathan Ake having that header from a corner, which, let's be honest, is a type of chance that could fall to any side. That chance doesn't get made from great tactical nous or from philosophy or from build-up play. It's a chance that is the best on the day because a corner went really well for City and fell to Nathan Ake in the box and he should score. That was the best chance. I'm not going to debate that. But the best chances overall on this day fell to Arsenal. The best chances in this game fell to Gabriel Jesus in particular. And Leandro Trossard, of course, later on in the game also. And those missed chances for me and those chances that we created were the evidence that you need to understand how Arsenal set up for this game and to really silence the moaners and the critics and the people that just can't stop running their mouth in a negative way about Arsenal, despite the fact that they deserve immense credit for what they did. Gabriel Jesus was an interesting pick by Arteta. I think he was picked for his experience. Of course, he was picked because Gabriel Martinelli wasn't available. And he's faster than Trossard. And I think knowing that we were going to have a lot of opportunities on the break, he wanted someone that perhaps was a bit quicker than Trossard, maybe a bit more technically gifted with their feet to work in and around the box. For me, and it's just me, I actually still would have picked Trossard. And I picked Trossard in the game, in the lead up to the game, and I would have still picked Trossard with the benefit of hindsight. But it was always my intention that I wanted to see Trossard. And one of the reasons why I wanted to see Trossard yesterday is because despite the fact that he doesn't always have the best game in the world, he doesn't always have a brilliant performance like we saw against Porto, but just like we saw against Porto, you get him into a position in the box and he's got a great chance of scoring. I know that he had a good chance yesterday on his left foot in which he pile-drived an effort straight at Stefan Ortega, but I felt as though maybe if Trossard was in there from the start, we may have had a better opportunity to take some of those chances. This game, of course, brings up the debate about strikers again. I think it brings up that plan for the summer that despite the fact that we're scoring more goals than we've really ever scored and we're on track to break another Premier League record for how many goals Arsenal have scored, with 88 being last season's tally. And I think we're going to go into the end of this season perhaps with even more. This game in particular, I think, highlights still why Arsenal have a difference maker to go and get in the summer. Arsenal still have an opening to go and bring in that number 9 that could be the difference maker in games like this. Now, Jesus, I still think, has a place in this team, still has a role to play in this team, and his usage in the wide areas is certainly going to be something we get from him going forwards. But he had 2 big opportunities. He dragged both of those shots. He couldn't get a purchase on the effort despite some really good footwork and technical ability to create some space for himself. But he had to take those chances that we had. We also had the opportunity, as I've mentioned already, from Trossard. And at the end of the game, when Gabriel Martinelli had come on, there was that break in which Trossard, if only he squares the ball and notices it sooner and can execute that pass. I cannot help but think back to the game against Liverpool at Anfield last season, where Martinelli had that chance, I think it was, to play through Saka and didn't. It was kind of like a mirror image of the opportunity we had in a very similar game away from home at one of our title rivals. Of course, Liverpool weren't the title rival last season, but it was a really important game in the title race. And I couldn't help but get so frustrated to not see that pass happen in the end. It led to Trossard's chance, which, to be honest, I think maybe on another day he takes better, hits it low into the opposite corner past Ortega, but he's under pressure in that moment. He's taken on Akanji, and he does well, I think, in the end to still get the shot away, but absolutely should have crossed the ball in the end. And there were other chances as well where we turned over possession, where they had a couple of loose passes, Ødegaard running into space, Havertz running into space. I thought Havertz, by the way, and Ødegaard had 2 really, really good games, really positive games, really industrious games, just kept running, kept fighting, kept doing what they needed to do on the day, and certainly were helpful, more than helpful in the game in which we played. But there were opportunities where we did have opportunities on the break where maybe if we had a fully fit Martinelli, maybe if we had a fully fit Saka, we might have seen different things. In fact, I think I've labelled one of these slides, which I'll throw to now, of what could have been if they were fully fit. And I just want a game where we can go to City or play against City at the Etihad where there aren't questions. And I know that there were questions about City's team with Stones and Walker and Ake coming off as well, of course, and Ederson too. I know there was questions for them, but what they didn't have was any issues with their forward line. They had Haaland and Alvarez and Foden. They had Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne. They had every single one of their key attacking figures that has helped them achieve that 57-game run of scoring at the Etihad. Every single one of those players was available for them. And in a game in which we needed to have that cutting edge and that full fitness of our wingers, we didn't. And not having Saka and Martinelli fully fit for this game, and Saka actually came off with fatigue, not an injury, because he's barely played. I don't even know if he'll start actually on Wednesday against Luton. I might be tempted to save Saka and start someone else instead of Saka on Wednesday against Luton and maybe bring him off the bench in the second half just to give him that extra bit of rest. Maybe we can start Martinelli for this game. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But this for me is a very, very big point, and losing those two, not having those two at their full fitness was really annoying. And ultimately, maybe things would have been different if they were available at full fitness. And shows you again, I think, also just sticking with this briefly, in the summer we need that pacey winger. We absolutely need to go into the market and sign a really pacey winger to come in and be that third option for us. Trossard is the third option at the moment. I think he's a really good depth option and he offers some really good qualities, but we need someone else. We need someone like a Pedro Neto who's fit all the time, which Neto is not. I'd love Xavi Simons, but I don't think it's a feasible signing. But we need someone like that, someone who's got the pace and the technical ability to be a real asset to the forward line. And that has to be, for me, a priority amongst the centre forwards and the centre midfielder that we also need. It has to be someone that we go for in the summer. And if it means sacrificing your Nelsons, if it means even sacrificing a Trossard or a Vieira, absolutely we should be doing it. So we need to go into the market and find that player. Now, the game, despite the fact we had, as I've explained, the intention to win this game with how it was approached, the wall at the back needs so much credit. My goodness me, Saliba and Gabriel are stunningly good at the back. How silly some people must look with the way they spoke about Gabriel not so long ago. I remember writing an article about Gabriel. I think it was at the end of 2022. I think it was the end of 2022. It might have been the end of 2023, actually, but I think it was at the end of 2022. And I wrote this piece about how I was concerned that Gabriel was starting to become something of a scapegoat for Arsenal. It was during that season in 22-23, of course, last season, where we were starting to compete for the title, but we hadn't necessarily seen yet what we might get from him. And there was a real worrying sense of who that, because there's something about Arsenal fans, they always need they always need someone to target. And it felt to me for a while that Gabriel was going to start becoming that. I found it for you now, Yo. This piece I wrote in October of 2022, destroying the ridiculous Gabriel Magalhaes myth, threatening to undermine his Arsenal career. At this time, he was putting in performances that, despite we're getting criticised, his passing was better than the likes of Van Dijk and Koulibaly, who was doing well for Chelsea, and Christian Romero, of course, who was being lauded for Spurs in that period as well. His tackling, his defensive might was out competing some of those other names that I've mentioned there too. And there is just such a transformation in the view of Gabriel. For many, Gabriel was the man of the match yesterday against Man City. William Saliba was given it by Sky, but I actually thought that Gabriel was more deserving of that man of the match award. They were both brilliant, both fantastic. You could put a cigarette paper between both of their performances to award them, that awards. They were unbelievably good. And not only that, but just adding on to those two, complementing them also was Ben White, who ignored the noise of the international break to put in another top display. In the first half, he was the probably most threatening player we had on that right-hand side, getting forward, putting crosses into the box. There was a great chance where he crossed, I think, for Kiwior, who laid it back for Jesus, who again couldn't get a shot away in that moment. Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel were excellent. Kiwior was shattered, and I'm not surprised he had to come off in the second half. He just played 120-plus minutes for Poland as well. But Kiwior, I thought, had a decent display at times. Yes, he was getting tested by Silva in the first half, but he dealt with it as well as he could do. He created a couple of opportunities on the left-hand side. But the back four in general, and Raya too, should be really impressed and really happy with that performance. And again, it kind of shows you what Arsenal have. If we are keeping out the team, as I continue, and I'll hammer home this statistic because it is something that continues, I think, not to be appreciated for what it is. If we are the side, if we have the back four and the goalkeeper that are the team that can hold out a side that have scored 57 consecutive home games in a row, that's a stunningly good record to break. It's a great run to break. And not only that, but Arsenal haven't, as I say, Arsenal haven't been able to avoid anything other than a clean sheet for years. I think since the last time we won that game 2-0 back in, what was it, 2015, 2016? Incredible record that Arsenal managed to break here, and it was all part of that defensive performance as well. So we'll finish, of course, with the table of kind of where this leaves Arsenal, and we'll talk more about the game in the second half and tackle some of your comments as well. But where this, of course, leaves Arsenal with Liverpool winning yesterday against Brighton is that they have maintained that 1-point lead over Man City. Liverpool are now 2 points ahead of them, and that, of course, sent Liverpool fans into a spiral of some embarrassing takes yesterday afternoon and into the evening as well about how they would have approached the game differently, despite the fact that they've not won at the Etihad in 7 years. You know, they're telling us what we should have done differently. But I think from the perspective of where we are, it was always a result for me where we had to avoid losing. Winning was a massive reward, a massive bonus. And I think for me, there is still so much to be excited about. Arsenal lost at City 4-1 last season. We remained 2 points ahead of them in the table, but they had 2 games in hand that they would win both of. So in the end, those 2 games in hand translated to 4 points being ahead of Arsenal. So Arsenal, despite all the talk of apparently being worse than they were last season, that they're not as fluid, they're not as good, that Arteta hasn't been able to replicate it, that it was a one-season wonder. Well, this fixture last year saw Arsenal in the end fall 4 points when all the points were made up with the games in hand behind Manchester City. This time around, this year, Arsenal are a point ahead despite playing City twice and despite playing a much better Liverpool team this season twice. That's where Arsenal are at. Mikel Arteta has taken last season's progress, the successes that we had on individual basis, individual performance and individual progression. He's taken that from last season and he's made Arsenal better, more combative, more competitive, and given us a better chance than we had last season of winning the league. And that is represented by this league table here. And it is represented by the fact that we have played City twice, Liverpool twice, won 2, drawn 2, and are the only team of the top 3 to beat the other 2. Liverpool and City have drawn against each other twice. We have beaten both those teams twice, and it is representative of the progress that continues to be made under Mikel Arteta, the progress that continues to be made by Arsenal, and to put every single critic that ever continues to whine and, I nearly swore then, and moan and whinge about Arsenal and their competitiveness and their combativeness and the way in which they approach games, is put them in the mud, face down in the mud, time and time again. If you aren't seeing what we're doing, it's because you're refusing to. If you cannot see what this Arsenal team is achieving under Arteta and the progress and the direction it's going, it's because you're choosing not to. It's not because you're incapable of it anymore. It used to be. It used to be that some people just couldn't see it. Now it's impossible, and you are choosing not to see it. And that's on you. We're going to go to part 2 and your questions in a second. But of course, there's no slick segue here. But I do need to tell you about I could tell you about how good Gabriel and Saliba are at the back, of course, and how safe and secure they made the Manchester City attack feel that they might be able to score and then snatched it away. Well, you can snatch away the opportunity of pesky trackers from looking at what you're doing online by using, of course, NordVPN. I suppose as segues go, that weren't too bad. But of course, NordVPN gives you the ability to stay safe and secure online and change your geolocation on your laptop, your mobile, or, of course, your tablet device as well. You can hop from the UK over to anywhere else of the territories that NordVPN allow. Maybe you're going abroad, maybe you're going on holiday and you want to watch Match of the Day. Well, you can do that by hopping back to the UK digitally on your device using NordVPN's brilliant technology. If you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or 2 year deal with 3 months thrown in 3. That's the wrong way of saying it again. With 3 months thrown in free. With a 1 year deal and 4 months thrown in free on a 2 year deal as well. So do not hesitate. Make sure you go straight in and get that. And if you're not happy with it for whatever reason, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. And let me tell you, of course, about the prize that continues to be available on Football Prizes, which is the signed and framed Dennis Bergkamp shirt with the built-in TV playing some of the Dutchman's best highlights of the season. And there remains of this competition of 399 initial tickets, just 34 left. There's some instant win prizes that perhaps are still available too. UK only. Best of luck to all of you. Right, let's go to part 2 then and your questions right after this. Okay, we're going to jump into the chats. I'm going to take a quick swig of my water because that was quite the monologue in the first half. Sorry, that was some ASMR slurping of my drink then. Apologies. Yes, quite the monologue. And I can feel my voice maybe struggling a little bit for this part too. So I might need to relax into this one and slow down my talk because I may have gone too quickly. But I feel fired up. I've had many games that I've watched, over the course of this season, what have set, that have motivated me, that have made me feel a certain way. But yesterday's game, despite not winning it, set something ablaze in me, I think. And it really did impress me how different we can be, how combative we can be, that we can kind of put a middle finger, if you like, up to people that expect something of us or expect something of City and just display something completely different. And what set me even more ablaze, I think, was I'd go as far as to say just absent-mindedness of some of the takes that I saw post-match yesterday. It was quite ridiculous reading through social media. I mean, I arguably should have probably stayed off of it, to be fair. But some of the tweets I was getting, I didn't watch any channels yesterday because I tried to stay away from YouTube in particular after games. But on social media, reading through some of the replies to some of the tweets that I was putting out, I couldn't quite believe some of the things that were being said, and it really is frustrating. Matthew here says, I don't think this draw brings us closer to the title this season in terms of the maths and our running. However, it makes me more confident regarding the Champions League. The Champions League point's a fair one. I think obviously it showed that we can be, I think it was like a bit of a tournament game in some way, avoiding the defeat, having won the home leg, if you like, earlier in the season. But to say that I don't think it brings us closer to the title this season, I think is a mistake to say, because obviously this fixture last season, you lose it 4-1. How does avoiding defeat not bring Arsenal closer to the title compared to last season? Surely it does. Just by definition, it does. So I don't really get that first point, Matthew. Mikey says Bernardo Silva was waxing lyrical about us in his post-match interview. So honest by him. Respect. Yeah, he talked about the fact that Arsenal now, along with Liverpool, will have to drop points for City to win the league. That is the difference that Arsenal have made this season. That is the difference that we've created. Let's scroll up a little bit more because I know I've missed a load of questions as I was ending part one. So we'll scroll up and try to not miss these. Ben says, but we must speak about those Saka and Jesus performances. Rotation is needed specifically for times like this. Tired of seeing Saka doing the same things and not getting hooked. Arteta. I mean, to be fair, we don't have another option on the right, really. That is the area of the team where we are really lacking depth. Martinelli, who is an out-and-out left winger, came on and played on the right. If Saka's a modicum of fit, you play him. It's as simple as that. Could he have come off sooner? Maybe, but Martinelli was only fit to play the amount of minutes that he played in yesterday's game. We weren't able to get any more from him. So it was. I saw people saying we should have brought on Martinelli earlier. We couldn't. The reason why he came on when he did was because that's all we could be afforded to give Martinelli yesterday. So I understand the frustration about Saka's performance, but to be honest, this was a Saka that wasn't fully fit. This is a Saka that had one training session before this game, but we didn't have a choice. We had to play him. We absolutely had to play him. So I don't think there was too much of a choice there. Zana says the dropped points from winning positions against Fulham and Spurs will be the major reasons why we fall short. Not what we did against Liverpool or City, but as others said, still lots of footy to go. I think those games, obviously, against Fulham and Spurs, you're never going to have a perfect run. I say that. We obviously did go unbeaten in 2004, but it's stands out, I think, as one of the biggest achievements, if not the biggest achievement in English football, more so, I think, than the treble, because you have to be so perfect. And even then, we dropped points that season. People say Arsenal drew too many games that campaign, So I think from the perspective of those points where we dropped them in the first, we dropped them last year. Arsenal still weren't perfect. They weren't refined yet. They weren't the team that has gone on to win every game bar this one. And in this case, we still managed to get a clean sheet at Manchester City, taking us forwards. It would have been the first time, I think the stat was the first time in either a decade or two that we managed to win the first this many games into a year. Again, another record Arteta would have been setting. So yes, you're right to point out those games, but they were last year when still we were kind of tweaking things and there were still question marks, and Arteta had lost his left back and played Kiwior in an inverted role and then learned from that and then didn't play him inverted and hasn't played him inverted since that point. So, I think that there's still lots of footy, as you say, to go. But those games that we dropped points in early in the season were a consequence, and the games we've won are a consequence of those fixtures. We needed to have those games in some ways, I think, to be where we are now, to learn from the mistakes that we had from those games and to be a different side. After that Fulham game in particular, I couldn't see us winning the league. I came away from that Fulham game thinking, well, we've just lost to West Ham and now we've lost to Fulham. I don't see how Arsenal can win the league with how we've played these two games. And yet it turned out that that was a learning curve, those games. That those games were important, that those games were needed to be where we are now. And we've addressed those issues that we saw in those games and gone forward from there. Kunal says, Tom, what are your thoughts on Jorginho yesterday? I kind of touched upon this in part one. I thought, and I think most people thought, that Jorginho was the right pick because of the way that we wanted to approach the game. City didn't allow us to approach the game in the way that I think we initially intended to. And Ødegaard, as I said, spoke about the way we wanted to play, but ultimately City's performance led us to having to adapt and change. And Jorginho was picked to be in a side that wasn't supposed to be, sitting back and being perceived to be playing a low block and on the counter. Jorginho is picked to be a player that orchestrates things and pulls the strings and passes and plays through a press-resistant side. I think that in the end, it was right to bring him off. It wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't describe it as a bad performance. It just wasn't the right player for the job in the end. And that we didn't expect that to be the case. We went into the game with the idea of using Jorginho like we did against Liverpool, but City were too good in the end to allow Jorginho to play that game, and they nullified his threat very, very well indeed and very efficiently. Let's go to Ben says, we've done that one. Let's scroll down a little bit more. And Granddaddy Gooner says, Paul says, what changes would you make to give players a breather on Wednesday? For me, it would be Jorginho for Partey, Tommy for Kiwior, and Nelson for Saka. Yeah, I think they're probably smart picks, Paul, to be honest. I don't think that's too crazy. I don't know if Havertz or Ødegaard or others need a rest. But I think you're right. I think Tomiyasu should come in. I think Partey should come in. I think Nelson can come in. Martinelli maybe now get him starting, get him some more minutes as well. You could bring him in. So yeah, I think that that's the right way forwards, Paul. Chilo says, Tom, I'm not sure this new time works for us who are overseas. Can you turn back the clock, please? Also, how do you rate our chances winning the league after this result, considering who we have left still to play? Sorry, I can't control daylight savings, mate, I'm afraid. This is the time moving forwards for shows because this is 8 a.m. in the UK. So sorry about that. How do I rate our chances? I rate them better than what I thought our chances were before the City game. If you'd have asked me my thoughts on like where I looked at Arsenal, I said we were third favourites going into that game. And I'd still say that I think potentially you could argue with third favourites still, even though City are 1 point behind because of the difference in the runs that both teams have slightly. But I think we have a better chance now. I would give us a better chance than I would have done prior to playing City, because you always had to get over that game. That game was always there as something of a marker to disrupt the momentum to defeat Arsenal, basically. So now we've got past this game, we've avoided defeat. I would give us a better chance of winning the league than before, in terms of what I would have said as well. Maggie says, Tom, what was going on with Emma Hayes at the end of the game between Arsenal and Chelsea? Really unprofessional and petty. Yeah, I didn't think that it was appropriate at all what she did. I'm not 100% sure. I've seen a few clips of what Jonas Ardeval was doing. He got quite animated on the touchline, as loads of managers do. I don't know what he specifically said, so it's difficult to know. But I thought the label of male aggression was not helpful at all. I don't think that was appropriate for Emma Hayes. And I thought there was some hypocrisy in terms of talking about aggression. If you want to, teach a lesson, if you want to assess what's happened on the pitch, if you want to be critical of someone's behavior, you can't then go and push someone and then try and teach it. It doesn't work. It's like It's like bad parenting. It's like I remember listening to a thing about back in the day where parents used to be allowed to smack their children, and now obviously that's been made illegal. And I remember listening to a phone-in show, I think it was an LBC, where like a parent ran in to kind of defend the act of being allowed to smack their children as a punishment. And it's like the whole idea of so you're teaching your kids to do better by doing a bad thing. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's a hypocritical act. You don't punish by doing a bad thing that you would not want your child to do. And in this case, for Emma Hayes to come out and say, to be critical of Jonas Eidevall having pushed him, it doesn't make sense. It's quite hypocritical. So yeah, I don't think that situation was great at all. For the record, I don't like those that are saying, imagine if it was the other way around. I hate whataboutery. I really don't think it works. It's very, very different. I think there are differences. If you don't think there are differences between men and women, there are, quite clear, obvious biological differences. So you can't treat it like, you can't do the whataboutery of imagine if it was the other way around. It doesn't work. There are differences. So I didn't really appreciate that side of things, but I don't agree with obviously what Emma Hayes did, and I didn't think her words after the game were helpful at all. Ghost Nathan says, "What's our injury crisis look like now?" I think our injury crisis is obviously coming to an end quite mercifully. We've obviously been struggling with issues for quite a significant period of time, and so therefore, I think that we need to be in a position as a team where we can use the depth of our squad to our benefit, and hopefully we end up doing that. And Timber, of course, and we don't really have an update yet on Timber, but hopefully when he comes back to the team, that's going to be really, really important. I can see some of the messages coming in now. Quite crazy. Let's go to apologies if there's any connection issues. I know I had some at the start of the show. Apologies for that. I'm hoping it's sorted itself out now. Let's go to Manali Cream, who says it was a hugely impressive performance. 8 points off of our rivals. You can't ask for too much more. The league will be won or lost based on the results against the lower teams. Indeed. Disciple says it's double standards for me. People expect us to beat this treble winning City team just to prove something to the world, yet won't acknowledge that not losing to them also proves a lot. I think that's an excellent point. I think you're absolutely spot on. Jonas says, as Wenger said, if you can't win the game, don't lose the game. So proud and excited of how far we've come in the still relatively early process that this is. Rob says, defo an impressive display. Our defensive frailties cost us last year. Seeing how Arteta has focused on that for the first part of the season and how it's paying dividends shows Arteta's acumen. Absolutely. John says, yes, we are a steely team now who can't be bullied. Don't bother with the negativity. They'll also spout it. It's their nature. Some people just love it. I think, as I say, at this point, it's nothing to do with character. It's nothing to do with accidentally having a point of view. It's nothing to do with a lack of knowledge or anything like that. If you're critical of Arsenal at this point, if you're being, it's a choice. You're choosing to ignore the positives. There isn't, whereas before, there were so many things you could latch onto and genuinely criticize, genuinely have a point, genuinely not look like an idiot if you were jumping onto social media and spouting some rubbish in your tweets and my replies, like I had so many people yesterday doing. It's because you're choosing to not see it. You're choosing not to acknowledge the progress and the positives and the difference that has been made from this Arsenal side. Arsenal's set up to win yesterday. People might not want to see that. People may choose to ignore that. But Arsenal set up to try and win that game. And that was representative not only by the clean sheet that we kept, but by the fact that on the whole, we had the better chances to win the game. And because we had the better chances to win the game and we gave ourselves those better chances to win the game, it was obvious. The team selection showed that. Odegaard's comments after the game showed that. And the game itself showed that. We set ourselves up to win. We didn't set ourselves up to try and avoid losing. We set ourselves up to win that game in the best possible way for any team that could go to Man City. Any team that's gone to Man City to try and win and has succeeded has not done it through playing dominant football, by being ultra attacking. They have done it by playing, in a way, smartly, cohesively, intelligently, and by taking the chances that they get that will be very few on the break. People have tried to laud Liverpool for their approach at City, in the years gone by. They've not won at City in 7 years. Liverpool have not won in the league at City in 7 years. It's not happened. And you talk about the lauding of Liverpool's processes and how they go about things and how that's what we should be aspiring to achieve. The only reason they had 8 shots, I think, against City earlier this season, 3 shots on target. For the record, we had 6 shots, 2 on target, 1 shot less on target, 2 shots less overall, and they went 1-0 down in the first half, and they should have lost more. They should have lost by more than that. If City were more clinical on the day and had maybe a little bit of a controversial VAR decision not gone Liverpool's way when Ruben Diaz scored to make it 2-0 at the end before Trent scored towards the end of the game, they went 1-0 down in that game. It opened the game up more. City had the lead. They didn't have to be as dominant as they had to be. The reason why Liverpool didn't win at Anfield was because of the way they played. They didn't get a draw because of the way they played. They narrowly avoided defeat because of the way they played. Whereas Arsenal earned what they got yesterday because of the way they played. It was props to Arsenal. If you look at the 2 ways that both of the teams that went to City this season, in terms of who played better, Arsenal are the standout. Comfortably a standout. It's night and day compared to the way Liverpool approached their game against City. Liverpool were naive. Liverpool did what they always do, which people try to laud because it's not a boring game. Yesterday for the neutral, I understand, was frustrating. Yesterday, I really get it. If you weren't a fan of either team and you just wanted to see a great game of football, you probably would have been disappointed by what you got. And you would have been more happy to watch Liverpool play City. I get it, because Liverpool are more naive than what we are going there. And if it wasn't for poor finishing on City's part, and if it wasn't for some fortune from a VAR decision, Liverpool would have lost at City this season. Whereas this time around, Arsenal got what they got because they deserved it, because they earned it. And that's the difference between Liverpool and Arsenal this season at City. Owen says, what did you make of the ref display? I liked it. I liked it. I know the home crowd didn't. Maybe if it was the other way around, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe there's some naivety on my part there, but I liked it, Owen. I liked what I saw. I enjoyed what I saw. I liked how he didn't give cards. I liked how he let the game flow. I liked that he gave fouls when he needed to. I liked it all. I really did. And when Andy Taylor we didn't have a single VAR controversial game. That was great. I think that was more to do with the game than the ref, of course, but I really liked it. I wish all Premier League games had played that way. It actually reminded me a lot of what games used to be played like. I think it was kind of like an 80s, 90s refereeing performance in some ways. And that's a refereeing style that I miss. Fouls are given too easily. Cards are given too easily. It breaks the game up. It stops the game from being played. I liked it. I liked it. So, for the record. Fuad says, FFS, it's April Fool's. There's going to be loads of tweets. For the record, nothing of what I said today is in, for anyone that's leaving a comment saying, Tom's pulling an April Fool's of anything he said today. No, I'm not buying into that. This is 100% genuine what my thoughts are, my opinions are. I'm not going to try and deceive you with any of that stuff. So, without a doubt. John says, we've been hammered by the media for being naive and for not being pragmatic. And now we do this and they complain they're not entertained. The hell with the critics. Points and results is what matter. Absolutely, mate. Spot on. Practica says, I was surprised Anthony Taylor was fair to us. And with Jared Gillett on VAR, was seriously fearful of their calls. Thankfully, VAR didn't have to get involved. There was a moment in the second half when I was worried that Gabriel on Haaland, where there was a little bit of shirt pulling in the box, that might have been a bigger point than it ended up being, but it wasn't, which was good. So I was happy about that. Kai says, I thought the ref was shocking. Gave City so many fouls and said play on when they were fouled. I mean, did the same for us, Kai. I don't see what you're saying. I think that's a real biased point of view. I mean that with all the love and respect in the world, Kai, but I think you're being biased. I thought the ref had a really good game. You can't have it all. Yes, he allowed some fouls perhaps to go City's way, but if that means that overall we have a better refereeing performance, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it. Arsenal have to take the game out of the referee's hands, and they did that yesterday. They did that yesterday by being smart. They did that yesterday by not doing anything silly, not making any key errors. It was important to do what we did. Front Yard says, sorry, Tom, you say we don't have an update on Timber on an interview with Young Philly. He said he won't be back until the end of the season unless I misunderstood. I've not heard or seen that, Front Yard, so sorry about that. Unless he's had a setback. All the indications were that he was making a return soon. So unless there's been a setback, and we've not seen him in any of the training images, to be fair, unless I've missed something. But yeah, I don't know about that one. So you'll have to take my word for it on that. We'll try and see if we can get one this week. Maybe we'll hear from Arteta on Tuesday when he has his press conference ahead of Luton. But until then, we won't have another update, I'm afraid. Fuad says, Tom, chances that Zinchenko gets sold this summer with 2 years left and potentially a new left back coming on top of the other players that we have already. There's always a chance. It depends on the offers that we get. It depends on the business that we want to do in the market. But there's certainly a place, I think, for Zinchenko. I tell you what I didn't really do yesterday. I didn't really look at the bench. I didn't see who wasn't picked. I didn't really make too much of the Arsenal bench yesterday. Arsenal's bench yesterday was Zinchenko, Vieira, Nketiah, Smith Rowe, Ramsdale, Trossard, Tomiyasu, Martinelli, Partey. So who missed out? Who wasn't there? There must be somebody that wasn't picked. There's no Nelson there. So Reece Nelson wasn't on the bench yesterday, which is interesting if he's not injured, because usually we've seen Smith Rowe picked ahead of Nelson. So that's it. Cedric wasn't there, of course, either. But yeah, no Reece Nelson on the bench yesterday. And that's slightly interesting as a point to look at. Maybe that tells you something about what Smith Rowe and where he's in the lineup that maybe we didn't think before. Vera says, what's your prediction for the final points tally? Oh, it's impossible, Vera, because every time I get asked these questions about what do you think Arsenal will do, where do you think we'll finish, what do you think points tally, how many goals will we score, what we do in XYZ game, from now to the end of the season, I think Arsenal can win all of their games, So any game that we play, I think Arsenal should win from now to the end of the season. So if you were to ask me what do I think about our points tally, I'd do whatever we have. 9 times 3 is 27. So add 27 to the tally, and that's what I think we should get, because I think we can win every game. In reality, that probably isn't going to happen. But I look at every game that we've got left, and I think, yeah, Arsenal should win that. Arsenal can win those games. Arsenal can win every single game we have. So it would look silly, but yeah. Mrs. Thierry Henry says, March manager of the month. Oh, it's got to be Arteta. It has to. Surely it has to be Arteta, right? I'm trying to think. I suppose there's some other managers maybe that have won more games because, of course, we had a game missing and there was FA Cup games. Yeah, I mean, Unai Emery didn't beat West Ham. They drew with West Ham, so I don't necessarily think they'll get it from that. Spurs. What was Spurs' results? Did Spurs drop any points in March? They lost to Fulham. Yeah, so they can't win it. Wolves, I think Wolves have dropped points as well, because I know Gary O'Neill was being talked about. I guess Arteta's up there. It might be Klopp, and people are saying like they lost the cup game, but they don't factor in the FA Cup when it comes to manager of the month. So yeah, they beat Brighton, they drew with City, and they beat Forest. I guess it's between Arteta and Klopp, I think. And I think that Arsenal's result at City is more impressive. To be fair, it was the last game of March. I don't even know if they take that into account. It's like when they do the manager of the year and they decide it in October, So I think, yeah, it's between Klopp and Arteta. And I'd say that Arsenal's result at City is more impressive than Liverpool's result at home to City. So Silva, that's a good shout. Fulham fixtures. Let me have a quick check of Fulham's results last month. Marco Silva could be in with a shout here. They drew with Sheffield United. They lost to Wolves. They beat Spurs and they beat Brighton, but they lost to Wolves and they drew with Sheffield United. So I'm not sure he's done enough. Yeah, I'm still saying it's between Klopp and Arteta, and I think Arteta should edge it, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It will probably be Klopp. You're right, Maximus. It will probably be Klopp. You're right. I can't even remember our results, to be honest. Our March results. I try and forget. I put these things behind me so quickly. Obviously, we drew City. We beat Brentford, and we beat Sheffield United away 6-0. It's one of the biggest Premier League away victories ever. So maybe maybe we deserve credit for the 6-0, as well. Maybe Arteta deserves it more than Klopp does. So there you go. Right. Carl says, things don't happen in isolation. We played the way we did because a world-class coach with a world-class team stopped us executing our main plan. And this is true. Like, I don't get how people are forgetting about the other team in the equation here. I think that's the mistake that the biggest critics from yesterday have made, is they've just looked at Arsenal. They've almost treated it like we were playing someone else, and I find that troubling. I find that an issue. People, as I talked about in the first half, the big elephant in the room yesterday was City. City were there. City played their game. City played well. City were good yesterday. They couldn't finish, but they were good. I say they couldn't finish. We limited them to very few chances. The header from a corner it's a bit of an anomaly. It depends on your corner. Anything can happen from corners, really. It's a bit of a chaos moment. But beyond that, they didn't create too much. I know there was that weird moment where Haaland stepped over the ball, but he was trying to cut the ball back. He wasn't shooting. And he stepped over the ball instead. I know people talk about that as a big missed chance. And I suppose it is, but it wasn't a shot. It was an attempted shot. It was an attempted cutback. So I think people are forgetting the elephant in the room, which was City, and they're analysing Arsenal and just Arsenal, rather than the actual context of the game. John says it was a game of chess, one move countering the other, and we played perfectly, didn't lose, and could have won. We were away. It's those 3 words there. The 3 words in John's comment are the most important point, which are could have won. Because there's so many times where those words don't exist for Arsenal at the Etihad. Those words have not existed at the Etihad for years and years and years. And that is the difference. And that is what Arsenal did yesterday. And that's what Arteta did yesterday to hammer this point home. Arsenal set themselves up to win the game. They didn't set themselves up to try and not lose it. Arsenal set up to try and win yesterday. And they did that by playing the game that they played. They did that by having to adapt because they couldn't play exactly what they wanted to play. So they had to adapt. And ultimately it ended up being a performance that we can laud, but we can also look at the chances we missed. We can look at what we could have done better. We can look how we could have changed things. And things could have been different. Sadly, they weren't. But things could have definitely been different on the day, and we could have finished the chances that we created for ourselves, but sadly didn't. Amira says, so where's all the noise about City still not winning a single game against any of the top 5 this season? Exactly. Another really big point, and that's the thing, like all the scrutiny was on Arsenal, despite the fact that City have failed to log more than three shots on target against Arsenal in 2 games. That's what we limited them to. All the scrutiny's on Arsenal. I suppose it's because we're the pretenders, we're the challengers. We've not done anything yet. City have won all they've won, so all the scrutiny is on us as the challengers, the people that are trying to do something. So yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see until if indeed we can win something before that rhetoric changes. John says, I was sat in a room with Spurs fans. Even they had to admit that we're a really good side now, and it's always been fun in my family. KW3 says, I thought we had some good chances. Jesus lacking a little killer instinct, but a draw at the Etihad is still a good result. Trevor says, I think Arsenal got it right. Arteta's tactics were spot on, and we were not playing a mid-table team. You're as good as your opponent allow you to play sometimes. Carl says, Tom, people wanted us to open up and get battered so they can have something to talk about. They have missed bantering us, and that's why they never see any positivity in everything that we do. Arsenal Avengers says, outstanding result for yesterday. We are winning the league. I love your optimism, mate. Gavin says, they played exactly like it was away at City, but that meant an extremely defensive first half and about 10 to 15 minutes of attacking in the second when we looked good. Fit squad and players could have won it, absolutely. Zana says, 2 shots on target, both from corners in both games. It's a really good point. City's shots on target came from corners, and I hadn't thought about that. It's a really excellent point, Zander. Kazang says Gvardiol was City's man of the match. He was probably the most impressive performance I've seen from Gvardiol actually this season. I've been a little bit critical of him this year, but he was very good yesterday. Peter says, Tom, people are suggesting that in this game Arteta reverted back to Kiwior being inverted. Do you think this was true? I didn't notice that. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. Um, I didn't notice that, Peter, but I will have a watch back and I'll come back to you. Namdi says, now I know there is an agenda. Last season we lost 4-1. Pundits said we needed to avoid defeat. We avoided defeat and they scrutinise how we've achieved it. It gets tiring. Shame is all I can say. Absolutely. Abdul says, Tom, if you check our results and performances against Chelsea over the years, there is clear progression. I believe that will progress over the next couple of years for the Liverpool and City games as well. It's just a good barometer, I guess. Arsenal are unbeaten at Stamford Bridge, I think, for the last 3 or 4 seasons. And now, of course, we are unbeaten at Anfield in the last 2 seasons. And now we're unbeaten this season at the Etihad. So that's maybe a barometer of progression. I think it's a really good point. Rob says, do you think Vieira has a chance of playing again this season? If not, should he be sold in the summer? And where does he fit into the team? If his only place is Ødegaard as backup if he is being injured at the moment. I think there's certainly scope that Vieira could move on and that we could look to move him on. He's not really been getting too much of a chance, to be fair. And I think maybe there is scope for him to get more chances, but it's difficult to see where. Do you play him on Wednesday? Can you risk playing him on Wednesday? Arsenal need to respond against Luton, of course, in midweek. But I think we also need to make a few changes ahead of what is a really important and tricky game away at Brighton at the weekend as well. Mr. Thugi says, I think it was pretty similar to our first game against City this season, and only difference that we scored there as well. John says, how good are our defensive units from front to back? It's very impressive. It is impressive. There's nothing else that can be said about that. I think it says, Tom, would the away kit have made a difference in our result if we wore it? Oh, I mean, that fabled away kit, you never know. It could have done. Maybe it could have done. Do we play our away kit? Do we wear our away kit Brighton? I think we do. I think we wore the black kit last season at Brighton, so I think we'll probably be wearing it again at the Amex as well. Late Bloomer Stories says, Tom, you said Porto stunk the place out when they played like that against us. Late Bloomer Stories has not been listening to this show because I said that Porto came with a game plan to sit back, absorb pressure, and hit on the counter. And all I've said through this show, if you've been listening, is that Arsenal didn't come to this game with the intention of sitting back, absorbing pressure and countering and parking the bus. If you paid any attention to what Arsenal did yesterday in the way they set up, in the way that they spoke, in the way that we answered questions after the game, Arsenal did not do what Porto did. Arsenal were forced back by the way that City played, but we set up with Jorginho with the aim of being press resistant. But ultimately, City were so good in what they were trying to do going forwards that they forced us into those positions that we had to drop in, had to defend deep at times. So, yeah, you're late to the party, as your namesake suggests. Tyler says the backup players will play in the remaining games. They'll be pivotal in where we finish due to the amount of games that we have left. Paul says, oh my God, okay, catch-up show for me. I only just woke up from celebrating our amazing draw. I'm never really one for celebrating draws. And I've certainly not come into this aiming to celebrate a draw. I've come into this with the aim of appreciating what we did. I celebrate victories. I appreciate what we did yesterday. And I think that's important. But I don't really want to be... I don't really like the perception of celebrating a draw. And I think hearing from Saliba and Ødegaard after the game saying they weren't satisfied, Arsenal were not celebrating yesterday. Arsenal's players, Arteta, they weren't celebrating yesterday. They were appreciative of what we did. They were understanding of how we performed, but there was no celebrating. There was no celebrating in that team. All that team wanted was more. All that team wanted was to win. All that team wanted to do was go forwards, was to get better, was to respond, was to actually win that game, And I thought that was great. The mentality of that team is so different. Before, Arsenal could be seen as celebrating draws. There have been games where Arsenal have been scrutinised for the way they've celebrated games, of course. There wasn't any celebrating yesterday. Yesterday was not about celebrating a draw. Today is not about celebrating not losing. Yesterday was about appreciating how we avoided defeat, the strategy that we implemented, the challenge that we successfully held at bay, and scrutinising what we didn't do well enough, which was, of course, our finishing and what what we did in the final third as well. Mateta United says, Tom, whatever, but you aren't sitting top of the... Is this a United fan trying to... Goodness gracious. I'll tell you what, I respect the hustle, but for any United fans jumping into the chat box, that's made me laugh. You've made my morning. Maximilian says, Tom, what exactly happened to Freda Marnham? There really isn't much visibility on her going down the prayers for her at the moment. I don't know. I'm afraid I don't have any information on that one. Avamon says, I was gutted yesterday that we didn't win, but we had chances that we bottled, sadly, but I'm satisfied with the draw. Late Bloomers replied saying Porto also wants to play on the counter and succeed in the first leg by scoring, and they also made a lot of tactical fouls to stop the flow of the game. Yeah, I'm not saying there's similarities between some of the things they did, but again, not listening. Not listening again, despite the fact that I've said that Arsenal came into this game, they didn't have the intention of playing to sit back and counter. The intention was to be different. As I've said, if you go and listen to the interview of Odegaard after the game, it will tell you exactly what the plan was and how they had to adapt. So it was not the plan in any way, shape or form. Mikey says, yesterday's performance was so sophisticated. If people can't see that, more fool to them. I'm so over them, indeed. It is a United fan in the chat. Look, I tell you what, I respect the front that you've got. But my goodness me. My goodness gracious me. Jason says there's a conflation in the discussion between the outcome in the first half and the intention. It was deflated and Jason's been cut off, so I'll see if there's a finish to that point. Innocent says people are forgetting that Man City have not defeated Arsenal this season, so Man City fans are angry because they have bottled those games. The Walking Man says we are one Liverpool draw away from being top again. It's very true. You know, Liverpool draw any game and we win the rest and the title's ours. And, you know, you can absolutely see. I mean, shall we have a run through of the fixtures that remain for all three teams? Liverpool's next game is against Sheffield United. They then go away to Manchester United the weekend. In the Europa League, they've got Atalanta, of course. Liverpool still playing Europa League football. They've got Crystal Palace at home, followed by Fulham away, which is not an easy game. And lots of teams have gone to Fulham this season, including us, and failed to win. They then go away to Everton. They then go away to West Ham, 3 away games in a row before they then host Spurs. They then go away to Aston Villa, which is also a difficult game. They're at home to Wolves. Wolves have taken points off plenty in their final game of the season. In terms of City's fixtures, we should probably have a look at that if I can find City. There they are. Let's have a quick look at City's fixtures that they've got to come. They're at home to Aston Villa at midweek, which is a tough game. Away to Crystal Palace, of course, in the next game. They're at home to Luton, and between those games against Real Madrid in the Champions League. They were then away to Spurs, which of course has never been an easy game for City. They then got their FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. Then away to Brighton, away to Forest, at home to Wolves, away to Fulham as well. As I said, tricky game that. And then in the last game of the season, they are at home to West Ham. So there are some tricky games. And then for Arsenal, of course, we've got the hardest run in. We know we do. We are at home to Luton, away to Brighton. We then got our games against Bayern Munich, sandwiching a home game against Aston Villa. We're then away to Wolves, or then at home to Chelsea, away to Spurs, at home to Bournemouth, away to Manchester United, and at home to Everton as well. I think there's some games there, you know, that you do look at and you think you can rotate perhaps some players, but we've got lots of reasons to be positive. Right, let's go to HFN, who says Liverpool were very nervy. In fact, I think I'm going to have to end the show there. I've been going on for over an hour. I didn't realize actually what the time was. So thank you to everyone that's listened. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy and respectful. And do reflect upon what was a really important result yesterday. If you're listening on catch up, thank you for listening. Please do drop a like on the video if you could, and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. to give you more of a breakdown and a look ahead to the game against Luton on Wednesday. Have a fantastic Monday start to your week. And as always, up the Arsenal.